Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm very glad you could join us today for our webinar on cybersecurity in the real estate industry. My name is Tate Militana, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. Before we get started, I want to provide some best practices for our session so it goes smoothly. Shortly, we will have a presentation from Leslie Longstreet of the Cyber Readiness Institute. And during the presentation, all participants will be on mute so we can hear Leslie clearly. Following the presentation, we will have a short Q&A session. You may raise your hand to ask a question or submit your question in the Zoom chat. I want to thank the Realtyna team for organizing this webinar. Realtyna is a leader in real estate tech solutions for WordPress and home to organic MLS integration, one of the strongest IDX options available for real estate agents seeking SEO. And now let me introduce our guest speaker. In her already extensive experience, Leslie has stood out as a leader and communicator working on some of the world's most challenging cybersecurity problems. As a director of outreach and partner engagement at CRI, Leslie helps empower small businesses to become more secure and resilient online. She also brings experience from the venture capital world, where she worked with emerging cyber companies to disrupt and advance cyber adversaries. Leslie is a role model serving as a mentor for women in cybersecurity, and she is a presenter for the Women in Cybersecurity program sponsored by the United Nations Specialized Agency, the ITU. Leslie, thank you very much for all you have done in the cyber world and for joining us today. And now it is with great honor that I pass the program to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Tate. I'm very excited to be presenting to all of you that are here on the call today. Thank you so much for giving us this 45 minutes to an hour. And I hope that you enjoy the discussion and have some questions towards the end. As Tate mentioned, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to raise your hand or type it into the Q&A. We can either address them midway through the presentation or at the end. I will go ahead and move to the agenda. So thank you, Tate, for the introduction. And I will cover a little bit about CRI and our background. And then I will dive into the cybersecurity environment, not only as a whole, but also a few pieces that are related specifically to the real estate industry. And then I will cover the CRI approach. And then I will cover ransomware, which is a very important topic right now and is definitely something that has picked up during the pandemic. And I'm well aware that both phishing and ransomware are issues that the real estate industry faces regularly. So we will go ahead and cover some of the current cybersecurity environment and risks. Wire fraud is one of the fastest growing cybercrimes in the US, and consumers need to understand that the risks exist within every real estate transaction. We'll talk a little bit about some issues that could come up with wire fraud and how some of the hackers can trick you into potentially wiring quite a bit of money to the wrong person or things like that, or tricking your clients into that. But we'll cover that a little bit later. As real estate transactions become increasingly digital, cyber criminals continue to get more and more creative in their efforts. This is absolutely true. Hackers are always looking for the quickest way to make money, and they are looking for ways to basically get as much, like either wreak as much havoc or get as much money as they possibly can. And they've got a lot of time on their hands, and this is just what they do. This is their job for the most part. So it's interesting as more companies have shifted online, especially during the pandemic, how more creative these hackers and cyber criminals have gotten. And just a general stat, 67% of small and medium-sized businesses fail to survive a cyber breach. I'm not sure exactly the type of attendees we have on this call, but I'm assuming that a lot of you are maybe fall between the small and medium-sized business. If you're a larger enterprise or business that is on this call, you might have a little bit more backup to help you survive a cyber breach. But as far as the smaller businesses go, it's generally quite expensive to recover, and it causes significant reputational damage. 56% of organizations suffered a breach caused by a third party. Third parties, as most of you know, we all work with them, whether it's your email provider, your credit card company, your outsourced IT firm, you name it. Anything that is connected to you that is not under your own IT and in your network is considered a third party. We'll move on from here, and I will cover a little bit of background on the Cyber Readiness Institute. We were founded in 2017, and we were convened by a group of senior leaders of global companies and their value chain partners. This was following up a committee that many of these senior leaders sat on for the the Obama administration back in 2017. And the CRI Institute was founded to follow up on some of the recommendations that convention of people got together to do. So the idea was to share cybersecurity best practices and resources for small businesses because the way small businesses and medium-sized businesses need to approach cybersecurity is different than the way large businesses approach cybersecurity. The end goal is the same, similar to doctors like MDs and adult doctors and pediatricians. End goal is having a healthy human, but the approach to get there is a little bit different, and you have to use a couple of different approaches. So CRI develops free content and tools to improve cyber readiness of small and medium-sized enterprises. And it's really great. We've got these awesome members, MasterCard, Principal, ExxonMobil, GM, PSP Partners, Microsoft, and the Center for Global Enterprise. And they are fully supportive of CRI and our mission, and they help give us the funding to be able to provide this free content. And they also help direct our content as well, because they are able to reach into their value chain and their supply chains, find out what issues they're facing, and they can help inform our content. So the CRI approach is a focus on human behavior, authentication, patching, phishing, and USB use. The idea with focusing on human behavior is that small and medium-sized enterprises and businesses don't necessarily have a huge budget for cybersecurity. So we're not going to tell you to go out and spend a bunch of money on firewalls, you name it. Those are important, yes, but having policies and creating a cyber ready culture is just as important as having those additional security controls. We think that having an incident response and resilience plan is extremely important. And we have both the Cyber Readiness Program, remote work resources, and the Cyber Leader Program that are all free to use. And they kind of walk through all of the authentication, patching, phishing, and USB use, creating policies around that. And then the Cyber Leader Program goes a little bit more in depth into all of those things, as well as telling you how to communicate this a little bit better with your organization. The Cyber Readiness Program, which is our flagship program, also covers all of this, and it walks you through how to create an incident response plan in a cyber readiness playbook. So a cyber leader within an organization drives the execution. So if you go through the Cyber Readiness Program and then through the Cyber Leader Program, you are a cyber leader. A cyber leader within an organization is ideally someone that touches from the top to the bottom, or is at least comfortable talking to all levels of an organization and is able to drive policies and procedures through. So as I mentioned on the last slide, our members, our GMs, Microsofts, MasterCards, they provide us info and direction for our content, but we also have a small business advisory group. And that is a group of companies or organizations that either are small businesses or work directly with small businesses. And this group also helps provide us input on what small businesses and medium-sized businesses are facing currently, and helps us also direct the direction of our content. So, as I mentioned before, the Cyber Readiness program is focused on four core issues: passwords, software updates, phishing, and USB and removable media use. And I'll just go through a couple of stats and talk a little bit about each of these four things. So for passwords, 99.9% of account compromise attacks can be prevented by multi-factor authentication. Most of you know what multi-factor authentication is, I hope. Dual factor authentication, you name it. Anytime that you're signing into your bank and it's asking you to put in your phone number to send you a code, that is an example of dual factor or multi-factor authentication. Occasionally, they'll have you go through a couple of steps, which is the multi-part. But either way, if someone does happen to gain access to your password, if you happen to use the same password multiple times, even though you should not, having unique passwords for each account is extremely important, especially for work accounts. But if somebody does happen to get access to your password, having that next step of you physically confirming yes or no, I was not trying to log in, is extremely important. And it really does help a lot. Another stat on passwords is that 17% of people use their favorite sports team and the current year as their password. This is extremely interesting, especially whenever we start talking about phishing, because hackers, as I mentioned before, are coming up with new and creative ways to exploit people, right? So they will use social engineering, they will go look at your Facebook, they will go look at your LinkedIn, see where you live, and basically they can then have a list of things that might fit you as a person and can go try to brute force your password. Like, let's say you live in New York or in Florida. We'll go Florida because I'm from there. So let's say you live in Florida and you posted a picture of you at the Stanley Cup or something, and the Tampa Bay Lightning is your favorite team, and you've had years of supporting them. The hackers might go in, and since the Lightning just won the Stanley Cup, they might go in and think that that might be your password. Or maybe they see that you're a Lightning fan and then you graduated in, I don't know, 1992, you name it. Either way, they can use all of this information to have better guesses at your password. So that's why, again, why the multi-factor authentication is extremely critical. Let's go to software updates. 60% of breaches in 2019 were linked to a vulnerability where a patch was applied or was available but not applied. Patching is the same thing as software updates. Software companies will regularly test their systems and send out updates. So this is like a tent that has a hole in it. You're not going to let the rain keep coming in. You definitely want to patch that to keep your system and your tent secure and dry. But basically, if you don't patch, or if there is a software update that's released, as soon as that software update is released, hackers will know about that, and then they will try to start attacking your system. So that's why it's extremely important to keep your software updated. Enabling auto updates is a really great idea, because that way you're getting prompted, and as soon as there is an update available, you're seeing that. Just take the 5-10 minutes, whatever it is, to just go ahead and update your system. I know it's a pain, but it will really save you a lot of headache in the long run. Ransomware is one of those attack vectors that thrives on people not updating their software. I'm sure all of you remember WannaCry back in, I want to say it was 2017, that shut down a ton of different hospitals, shipping companies, all across the world. And it was all because people did not update. I believe it was Microsoft 10. They had the patch available, but they had not updated, or they were not able to update because their system would not support that. So keeping your systems up to date is critical. And then phishing, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the favorite sports team and hackers having a lot of time on their hands and looking through your social media, looking through any of your online presence to really learn about you to then try to gain access to your accounts. They can be really obvious phishing emails, and then other ones are really good. They can act like they're your bank, trying to get you to reset your password. So then they automatically get your password because you're typing it in there, but it's not actually a link to your actual bank. So 91% of all cyber attacks start with a phishing email. And as I mentioned, banks are one that get copied a lot. So if you ever get a random email from your bank or your, I don't know, your credit card company telling you to update your password and give you a link to then do that, don't click on that link. Instead, go straight to your bank website and then you can update your password from there. But just avoid clicking on links or opening strange documents from unidentified people or people that like might be from a company you know, but the name doesn't quite add up. Either way, use your best judgment. 81% of companies that fell for a phishing attack lost customers. And this kind of goes back to the stat that I mentioned on the first slide, where a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises don't survive a cyber breach. That is not only because of how expensive it is, but also the reputational damage. And if you are a small business and you only have 30 customers and those 30 customers find out that you did not protect their data, they're probably not going to come back to you. And then the last issue that CRI focuses on is USB use. 8 out of 10 companies' employees use non-encrypted USB devices, such as free USBs from conferences. This may seem like not a huge deal, but you never know what could be on a USB. In general, try not to stick anything foreign into your computer, whether it is a USB or we don't use floppy disks anymore, but could be that, or like a drive of any sort. Just try to avoid sticking random things into your computer. And if you do, make sure it's a new device. And if you're using it to transfer something from your device to another device, make it a one direction use. Try not to go back and forth because let's say you're at a client's office and they have something like malware on their computer and you put your USB device in there, there's a chance that it could get contaminated. And if you put it back in your device, then you're automatically at risk. So in general, try to use new USBs if you have to use them. But cloud is also a really great option using like Google Drive or any of those. It's a better file transfer method. And I will just pause here to see if anybody has any questions currently. If not, oh, I do see a hand raised. Kate, if you would like to unmute, you can. If not, that's okay. We can cover that at the end. All right, I will go ahead and move forward. All right, so cyber readiness goals. Creating a culture of cyber readiness in your organization that spans all people, locations, and all devices is the core of cyber readiness. Cyber readiness habits need to be embedded in your organization, and that's not just telling people about all of these core 4 issues. It's also creating policies that people can actually understand and that are not going to totally inhibit their work. I really like both of these memes because I'm a huge Office fan and Lord of the Rings fan. But that is all for this slide. In general, it's important to just communicate to your entire organization. Make sure that your C-suite is aware of everything that your marketing team is aware of, and that your IT team is not the only team that you're communicating these policies to, or they're not the only ones that know about it. Everyone needs to know about all of the policies that are created. All right, and as I mentioned, you have to create policies that are that make sense to everyone. If you don't, and if you're not taking into account like what the marketing team needs or what your sales team needs, if they're not able to take their presentation and go to a client, they're going to do it anyway. So if you're telling them that they're not allowed to use USBs, they're going to either use their own personal USBs, and then you might have documents going outside of your organization onto a personal device, you name it. Either way, that is what work around culture is. So ideally, we want to create a cyber ready culture, which policies are developed with input from different departments and technology skill levels. They need to be easy to understand with minimum technical language. They need to be practical for people to follow and to do their job in a hybrid workplace. This is extremely critical now, especially since most companies have adopted somewhat of a hybrid work style based on the pandemic and that forcing function. So even though in the past, you might have had people that were all on the same network and you could control everything in the office. Now people are connecting to their home devices, their home networks, you name it. Creating policies around this extra risk is important. So workaround culture will happen, again, if policies are impractical, there's insufficient training, you're not communicating the training well enough, you name it. And it's okay for some people to ignore the policies. If you make one exception for someone, everybody's going to follow that exception. And I do see a hand raised again. Oh, it's actually a question. Based on what do hackers decide who they will attack? Honestly, it depends on the hacker, because there are different levels of hackers. There's little script kiddies, there's like the basement people that are just doing or hacking people for fun and just to wreak havoc. And then you've also got the people that are hacking for more monetary value. And then you've also got the nation state hackers. But it really depends. They will go for the easiest targets. A lot of times hackers will choose to target people with a lot of access. So admins, so like secretaries who have access to all of the C-suite's information, their calendars, their emails, anything like that. Hackers will go over or focus on people that they know that they'll have the most return on investment on. I hope that makes sense. And if not, we can cover that a little bit more towards the end. All right. And ransomware attacks. So this is something that you all have seen in the news lately. It is basically where a malicious actor will send you maybe a phishing link or something along those lines, or call you and get you to go to a website that is not good, and will get you to click on a link within that website. So essentially, they're conducted by malicious actors to hold an organization's data hostage for ransom. You guys all saw the meat company that got encrypted and had to pay ransom, the Colonial Pipeline. All of these things have been huge news stories lately. Malicious actors can gain access through various means: phishing, unpatched software, and visiting malicious or compromised websites. It includes data exfiltration and participation in distributed denial of service attacks or DDoS attacks and anti-detection components. Impact can be far-reaching and debilitating. Ransomware attacks are extremely common, not only for big businesses that you hear about in the news, but also for smaller businesses, because oftentimes they aren't patching their software, or they are used to clicking on links or opening documents from unknown people. So in general, if you're confronted with a ransomware attack, there's a few things that you can do, and we'll talk about that. There's some things that you can do before to help you not have to pay the ransom, and then you as an organization in your incident response plan should have a plan for ransomware attacks. So ransomware prevention and response. Human behavior is key. Again, as I mentioned before, phishing, software updates, those are all extremely important. And ensuring that you have policies within your organization to encourage people to keep up with these issues is very important. So the goals for ransomware prevention and response is to embed cyber readiness, including education and training, into how each person does his or her job. And this includes phishing training. So I'm sure if any of you work for a larger organization, you do get the probably monthly emails that are asking you how to, if you should click on a link or not, or should I open this attachment from an unknown person? The answer is always no. And when in doubt, when you're getting an email that's potentially from someone that you know or from a company that you know, pick up the phone and call them. It is the best way to do it. There is another component of phishing that's called vishing that people may call you. Um, there is a company right now that is doing it and pretending to be Apple and Apple Care, and they'll ask for your serial number and your Apple ID and your password all over the phone. If anybody calls you asking for all of that information, it is 100% not real. Don't give them that information. And if you have a weird feeling about it, hang up and call the actual number that you know is for sure that company. So develop good cyber habits. The Cyber Readiness Program walks through a lot of these cyber habits. We've walked through a few of them in this presentation, and we have a few resources on our website too that are free if you're interested in looking at that a little bit further. Create a culture of cyber readiness within your organization. Remember, you have to educate your entire organization, not just one department or one individual. The entire organization needs to be aware of cybersecurity and the risks that these core 4 issues could pose. Cybersecurity policies need to be as practical as possible, again, avoiding that workaround culture. So to prepare for a ransomware attack, just because this has been such a big topic in the news lately, I thought that this slide would be helpful. And we also have a ransomware playbook on the CRI website, and you can go take a look at that. It's always available, and it's really pretty fantastic. It's got a nice flow chart to help you make decisions about what you should do if you're confronted with a ransomware attack. So in preparation for a ransomware attack, you need to make sure you're creating backups. This is so prioritize everything that you actually care about in your organization and decide how much or how often you want to back this up. So for like maybe financial data or client data, you might want to be backing that up daily or hourly, depending on how sensitive it is. But for things that are not nearly as important or historical data, maybe only back that up once every 2 weeks. You just determine what is best for your company and create a policy around that. And just having a backup or a backup system and a policy is not enough because oftentimes there's issues with backups. So you need to make sure you're testing backups just to make sure that they still work. There's a couple of different ways that you can back things up. You can back it up on the cloud, which can be very expensive just because you're paying based on space. You can also back up onto a hard drive or something along those lines. The issue with that is if there's some sort of natural disaster, a fire, you name it, that backup could be gone. So having both is ideal. Potentially having one that you back up daily, hourly makes sense to have in the cloud. And for more historical things, perhaps a hard drive. Whatever works best for your organization, I'm just throwing out examples. You need to make sure your software is patched. This is, again, extremely important. As soon as software patches are available, hackers know that there are vulnerabilities within your system, so they may decide to come after you, whether it's your company or they're trying to target the company that's above or below you. Either way, they're going to go through the easiest route possible. Phishing training for all of your employees. Don't click on links. Don't give out passwords over the phone. Don't give out financial information through an email, and have a plan. So if you have an incident response plan and you are attacked by ransomware, not having to make decisions for creating a plan when you're under a lot of stress is ideal. So having a plan for what you do, how to respond, do you have backups? If you don't have backups, are you going to pay the ransom or not? CRI does not recommend paying or not. It is totally up to you. And ideally, we um, hope that you have your backups and you don't have to worry about paying a ransom. So if for some reason you don't have your backups, you can remove the infected devices from the network. If there are no tested backups, or if there are tested backups, you can just recover everything and it's fine. But without tested backups, you need to determine if you actually care about all of the data that was encrypted and is potentially lost forever. You could try a real-time backup, and you can check your insurance policy. Right now, this is a huge topic with cyber insurance just because of the increase in ransomware attacks since the pandemic has started. I want to say it is something like 20% of an increase in ransomware attacks since the pandemic has started, which is absolutely crazy. And it's driving cyber insurance policy premiums way up. But if you have cyber insurance, that's definitely something to look into for if you're attacked by a ransomware attack. And then you can also piece together information from various sources. Maybe you have someone who is not on the network that may have had some of your information, and it's critical information like your CFO or something along those lines, or outsource CFO, you name it. And then you can also contact law enforcement. And this is important just because both the FBI and CISA, they like to keep track of all of these ransomware attacks, and they may be able to help you. But in general, it's for the greater good to let them know that you have been attacked by ransom, because there could be trends that people are seeing, and they might be able to potentially track down these bad actors and lock them up. So once you've responded to the ransomware attack, then you have to recover. And then you should reset every user ID and password within your organization. Do a clean install from backups. Update all software, which it should have been updated before, but you could do it again. And then restore data from backups if you have it. And then ensure pre-event patches are still applied, which makes a lot of sense. Does anybody have any questions about this responding to ransomware piece? Okay, I will move on. Oh, I do see a question. Someone raised their hand. Amy, if you'd like to unmute, you can, or type your question into the chat. Okay, we can cover your question at the end. So this is just, again, a reminder about the core 4 issues that the Cyber Readiness focuses on, or Cyber Readiness Institute focuses on. We focus on human behavior to create a culture of cyber readiness. Authentication and passwords. Having multi-factor authentication updated on all of your devices is important and is extremely recommended. Patching your systems, enabling auto updates. Phishing, don't click on links, don't open random attachments from people. USB use, don't stick random things into your computer. It will save you a lot of trouble in the long run. And then creating preventative measures and practical incident response plans are keys to cyber readiness culture. All right, and then the Cyber Readiness Program, as I mentioned, it's our flagship program, and it has 5 different stages. So if you're interested in going through it, it is totally free to do. You can just go to becyberready.com or the cyberreadinessinstitute.org and see it. We'll send an email out after this presentation with this presentation recorded along with the slides and a link to our website. But it starts by preparing your organization and selecting a cyber readiness leader, assessing and prioritizing what is important within your organization, and learning about the core 4 issues, establishing baseline metrics. So where you are currently, whether you think you're cyber ready or not, just determining where you are. And then agreeing and committing. So access and modify policy templates so they're practical for your organization. And then develop an incident response plan from the template. Again, you have to communicate with all parts of your organization in order to do this step, because you have to create policies that are going to work for everyone and make sure that everyone is kind of bought into the cyber readiness culture. And then the rollout. So that is introducing the cyber readiness program to your entire workforce. You can access the training and communication kit through the cyber readiness program and distribute a workforce commitment letter. And then once you've done all of that, you've communicated with all of your employees, you've done the initial training, then you can redo your baseline metrics to measure impact. And then at the end of that, you can earn a certificate from the Cyber Readiness Institute, which is pretty great. And the Cyber Leader certification is no longer in development. I did not catch that. It is launched and it is a really great program. And it goes a little bit more into detail on all of these things. So definitely check it out. And just a couple of tips to leave you with for good cyber readiness habits. Log off your computer every time you step away from it. That's whether you are working from home, especially if you're working from a coffee shop or something along those lines. If you're working in an office where you have people that wander in and out, just in general, it's best to log off your computer every time you step away. Use multi-factor authentication every day across all devices that accept it. Strengthen your passwords, at least 12 characters, and passphrases are very helpful as well. So like, I like to walk my dog on Sunday. It's probably, I don't know the exact number of characters that is, but it's a sentence that's easy to remember and it's got enough characters in it that it satisfies most password requirements. Verify that you have backups and test your backups. And then if you are the cyber leader, ask one person each day how they're doing with their cyber readiness habits. And I believe that is it. And we can move on to Q&A. Tate, I will turn it over to you to kind of go through all of the questions and I'll answer as they come through.
Okay, thank you, Leslie, for the very informative presentation. Looking at some questions in our Q&A queue, first question that came in from Kate. Hello, I was wondering, are real estate businesses more vulnerable to cyber attacks? And what are some of the top cybersecurity issues?
So I don't think real estate businesses are any more vulnerable to cyber attacks than any other industry, other than the fact that they are spread across a lot of different areas. They interact with a lot of different people. They have a lot of financial information, as well as a lot of PII. So PII is personal identifiable information. All of these things are particularly interesting to hackers and they care about it a lot. So maybe from that sense, they might be more vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks than anyone else. And you're dealing with contracts on a daily basis. So you're constantly having to open documents, click on links, things like that. So just by the nature of the real estate industry, you might be a little bit more vulnerable, but having practical policies and knowing what things could put you more at risk is really helpful.
Great. Next question comes from Amy. How often does a user need to change their ID and password? And Amy also wants to know about the phishing training process.
Okay, so as far as how often a user needs to change their ID and password, IDs are pretty common. It's generally your email or your first name, last name. So that is going to be something that the hacker would likely know. As far as passwords go, if you have any sort of like potential incident or you think you might have been hacked or you have some suspicious activity on your network or your device, change your password immediately. As far as like company policies for when to change your password, that is totally up to you and your organization. Some companies require a password change every month, every 3 months, sometimes twice a year. It really depends. But I would say that changing your password is important. but also creating a unique password for each of your different accounts, especially bank accounts and things that are really important. You need to make sure that is totally different than your Netflix account. Netflix is breached on a pretty regular basis, as we all see that in the news. But things like that are really important to have separate. Keeping your personal passwords separate from your work passwords is just as important as changing them every 6 months. So I hope that helps answer your first part of your question. And the second part about phishing training, there's a lot of different companies out there that will do phishing training for organizations. I don't know of any free ones specifically, but if you just Google phishing training and things like that, PhishMe is one of them. There's quite a few out there, and they're all pretty good. There's different approaches to it, just whatever ends up working best for your organization. But just getting the word out there about not clicking on links. The Cyber Readiness Institute has some guidelines for what you can communicate to your organization. And then from there, if you decide you need more, there are options out there.
The next question comes from Veronica. She wants to know, are we 100% cyber secure if we follow all of these steps, or are there some additional details, and where can we find them?
So nobody is ever 100% cyber secure. The Cyber Readiness Institute and our programs will help you become more cyber ready. Cybersecurity, even the big companies that have millions of dollars to throw at cybersecurity are not 100% cyber secure. But these core 4 issues will help cover 80 to 90% of a lot of the cybersecurity issues that you would face. And creating practical policies and communicating all of these issues to your workforce is a huge step in the right direction. As you've seen with like Colonial Pipeline and things like that, they have quite a bit of budget and quite a bit of cybersecurity infrastructure. But what was their demise? Phishing, ransomware attack. At the end of the day, having people not click on links and having unupdated software is what causes all of these big cyber issues, even the ones that you see in the news that are from big cyber companies or big corporate companies that have a lot of cybersecurity infrastructure.
Thanks for that, Leslie. We have another question here. How can we protect sensitive information that we share with third-party vendors?
So I would say from this perspective, limiting the admins on your sensitive information is pretty important. But let's say one of your third-party vendors is your CFO, your outsourced CFO. You have to share some of that sensitive information. One of the ways that you can protect or help make sure that your third parties are up to date with the cyber readiness program is to share this program with them and to create a policy that you expect them to follow. So you expect them to make sure that they're not clicking on links, that they're updating their software, things like that. So create a plan that you would feel comfortable with sharing with a third party that you would like them to also follow. Because at the end of the day, when we're all cyber ready, we're more cyber secure.
The next two questions are related. They come from Charlie for the first part and Sam for the second part. Charlie wants to know about password generators using LastPass, for example. What's your opinion about using this kind of software? Are they safe? And Sam wants to know about saving passwords in browsers. Is this safe?
Okay, so this is one of my favorite questions because it kind of depends. I would say using LastPass and password managers is a really great idea. They do have their issues. You just have to determine the level of risk that you're comfortable with. But if you're going to have all of these really long, complicated passwords and passphrases, it can really help to have some sort of password manager. As long as you keep the password for that password manager unique and long and complex. And in addition to that, you also have multi-factor authentication enabled on that password manager. As far as saving passwords in browsers and like using the auto-generated passwords, I would say that it depends on the type of account you're doing it for. If it is for an account that does not have super sensitive information, like your Netflix, your Spotify, any of those types of things, sure, use the auto-generated password, save it in your browser. For something like your bank account, you have to determine your level of risk and if you're comfortable with having something generate your password and save it there. I personally use those a lot, but I also make sure that I keep my browsers updated. A lot of times, Patch Tuesday is when Microsoft releases all of their updates. So in general, every Tuesday, I will go through and make sure all of my software is updated. If I also have auto updates enabled, but sometimes they don't always push through. So every Tuesday, I just go through and I make sure all of that is updated. So I would say that yes, password generators are good and they can help you create a long, unique password, but those passphrases, like those easy to remember sentences, are also really great. But I think that the password managers are a great tool to use in general. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Leslie. Just a reminder, if you have a question for Leslie, go ahead and type it into the Q&A or raise your hand. Our next question is about ethical hacking. What do you think about the practice of ethical hacking to check the security of a company?
Okay, so I actually used to work for a company that did ethical hacking or pen testing. I think that it is a really great tool. There are companies that do it differently than others. Now there are like automated pen testing firms out there that basically run a program to test your computer or in your network, your organization as a whole. I think it really, like, it could be very useful depending on what type of network configuration you have and what you're trying to protect. Um, it just depends on what you're willing to spend. In general, I think that it's interesting and it's good to know what holes you have, but it can be very expensive depending on if you're having like a computer do the test or if you're having people do the test. In general, people are generally more expensive, but it's interesting and it can be very helpful. I as far as CRI standpoint goes, we don't have a specific standpoint on whether you should do it or not, but it can be interesting and very informative.
While we're waiting for more questions to come in, I'll ask one of my own, if it's okay.
Okay.
Can you tell me what a brute force attack is? I've heard the term mentioned many times, and I have to admit I don't quite grasp what it is.
So it is basically, as I mentioned before, like hackers will just try a ton of combinations of passwords on your computer. There are password hacking tools that are out there that pretty much not anybody could use. You have to have a decently strong computer to get it to run. But they basically put in a couple clues into there, and then the computer will run all of these different combinations and try to get into your account. And I had a slide in one of my other decks. I can send it out in the other, I'll add it to this whenever I send it out, but it gives you the timeline of what computers can hack your password in based on the number of characters. I think if you have 6 characters, it was something like 5 to 10 minutes. If you have more than that and up to 15, it takes like years. But so that's why we encourage long, complex passwords rather than the shorter with multiple characters.
Thank you, Leslie. That's all the questions we have for you today. If there's no other questions that come in here in the last second, we will conclude our webinar. Just give a minute for any last questions from the attendees.
Okay. Thank you so much for everyone that joined the webinar today. I really enjoyed presenting to you all, and thank you so much for all of your questions. And if you have any questions about CRI specifically or anything in this presentation, feel free to either reach out directly to me or through our info@cyberreadinessinstitute.org email address.
A final thank you to Leslie and CRI, and a thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. This will conclude our webinar. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.